Welcome to Designing Healthcare That Cares, the show where we explore how to build healthcare systems where people and performance thrive. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Suttin, a physician, coach, and healthcare leader who believes that human flourishing and organizational excellence go hand in hand. Each week, I talk with leaders, change makers, and innovators about how to shift culture, lead with purpose, and tackle the root causes of burnout. Because when healthcare works for the people in it, everyone wins. Welcome to the Designing Healthcare That Cares podcast. I'm super excited to have my guest today. I'll introduce her and then we'll jump right in. You're going to love this conversation. So I have Dr. Jillian Rigert. She is a physician, a dentist. She is a Martha Beck Wayfinder Master Coach and trauma-informed professional leadership coach who partners with clients during life and career transitions. She's an Air Force veteran with training in dentistry, medicine, and oral medicine. She is currently in school for marriage and family therapy with a focus in trauma. Jillian leverages her holistic training to provide a whole person approach to care. Her wingman is her dog, Reese Griffin. Welcome, Jillian.
Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. I'm so glad to be here, Laura.
So you were my very first guest on the podcast in January of 2024. We talked about reclaiming the narrative. If you haven't checked out that episode, check it out. It's one of my most highly rated episodes. And we were talking before we hit record about really what's coming up for us and what's the central theme in our lives lately. We're both in very different places than we were in January 2024. I had not yet put in my notice with my previous corporate job. And now it's been like almost a year and a half since I've been a full-time solopreneur, which I love. Mm-hmm. And you've also made another pivot and shift. I know you talk about that a lot, your permission to pivot into marriage and family therapy. And we've known each other for 3 years. Feels like a lot. I feel like we're soul sisters.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, we were talking about perfectionism and how much that shows up and in which ways it shows up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's start there. What comes up for you? How is perfectionism showing up for you?
Well, I feel perfectionism is something I used to wear as a badge of honor. Since I was a kid, everyone said, oh, she's just a perfectionist, very detail-oriented. Didn't realize how much it was the drive and desire to be wanted and have a sense of belonging. And then how much it really contributed to my self-sabotage and my increased suffering. And ultimately, the irony of perfectionism is it can lead to worse performance. So for me, I felt like I've been on this long healing journey and detachment from perfectionism as part of my identity. And when I see it show up, I don't hold my head up high and feel proud of it anymore. I look into it and say, what do you truly need in these moments? And I recognize it now as well in being a marriage and family therapy intern and a coach is how often it's coming up for clients of both in therapy and in coaching. How much it's increasing their suffering, increasing that sense of never feeling enough, how much we can trace that back to always wanting to have acceptance and approval from other people, whether it likely started in childhood, but then reinforced by our education system. So at this point for me, where I feel it still shows up is because my marriage and family therapy has didactic courses, it's very hard for me to detach from the grades and wanting to get 100% and all that. And what I've realized is that I have dialed up my self-compassion. I have really been cultivating a beginner's mind, one that comes from compassion, curiosity, non-judgment. And those have been very supportive in being antidotes for perfectionism. And something that I've shared with you is then, of course, my obsession with a documentary called Becoming Nobody and really just embracing who we are. And how that ties into perfectionism is that if we become comfortable with who we are and we're not so hyper fixated on what people think of us, it can really extinguish that need to appear perfect, since that's being driven as a way to get external validation and doesn't really come from the essential source or the source of our true essence. How about for you?
Okay, definitely. I will share. I just want to unpack so much of what you said so many nuggets in there. I don't know if you know this, but you just drop these like knowledge and it's just like boom, 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 boom. I'm trying to pick them up. So I definitely want to hear about the Ramdas documentary. Something that you said about perfectionism, you've been trying to distance yourself from it. And so it just makes me think about how my podcast and my message now about designing healthcare that cares is really looking at how's the healthcare system structured now for everybody, clinicians, patients, everybody, and how can we make it so that it's truly a human experience and we're not this uncaring kind of commodity that it appears to be right now. In my healthcare training, and I know you've experienced this as well because we've talked about it, really the siren call to be this ideal version of ourselves that shows up in ways like we sacrifice our own needs, we sacrifice our sleep and food and basic needs and our basic humanity in order to fulfill this idealized version of ourselves that we really can never aspire to, but we think we can because it's this comparisonitis. We look out and we see this version of people that they've portrayed, but we don't see everything that's going on behind the scenes. And you talked about enough, and I know we've both heard like, well, enough is a decision. It's not an amount. And the first time I heard that, I thought, that doesn't make sense. That might work for everybody else, but not for me. It really just brings home to me that we're so pulled in by messages that we receive very early and when we're very impressionable. And then our medical training that we have to be perfect. We have to get all A's. We have to be X, Y, or Z, this unrealistic, unattainable ideal. And to distance ourselves from that, to realize that, okay, that's the matrix. That's not who we really are, is really difficult. And it takes intention and it takes community, which you and I have found in each other and in different community groups. It's just so much easier to get pulled in than to pull yourself out. I think absolutely, like a lot of different, any sort of belief that's not serving us, it's hard to deconstruct from that. And I love what you said about it's really the desire to please other people. And that when we realize that we really just need to make sure we're being true to who we are, and your message about be true to you, that is like the antidote to perfection. I hadn't seen that association that clearly. So I think it's really, really helpful the way that you put it, that when we really know who we are and what we stand for, and you and I talked before we hit record about like, okay, what does this mean with who I align myself with and who I don't align myself? Where am I showing up in spaces where I don't feel completely supported? And how do I put myself more into spaces where I do? Yeah. And I'm sure for you, it's been a lot of unlearning journey for me along the way.
Absolutely. And you said, we think about we can let go of things when it's no longer serving us. And the difficulty with perfectionism, it does serve us in many, many ways.
Yes.
And to let it go is when it threatens our identity of this person that achieves and what does it take. And aspects of it really do serve us very, very well. And so we're afraid to let go of it, thinking that we'll perform worse. People will like us worse if we are not perfect. And the opposite's actually true. Though it takes allowing ourselves to embody it and to do that and to be imperfect. The things that I've been known for are my vulnerability and just being raw and like down to earth. And like I've always been that way, I think, is I like down to earth and real and honesty. And where I think the perfectionism, how that makes me show up is like I'm masking. I don't like it. It makes me feel like part of me is coming out that comes across as a big defense mechanism. Like perfectionism is a defense mechanism that you don't want people to see your imperfections, your vulnerability, the fact that you are human and that you have flaws. And so when I could feel the difference of here, I'm showing up my whole heart, where when I'm imperfect in my ego brain and I'm in defense. And so we'll notice in different cultures and different communities that we're in, if you're in a defense posturing, if I have to appear a certain way in order to be accepted here, that feels one way versus if you're in a different group. We know from the ACE group that we have, if you're familiar with the ACE and the Emerge community, you'll know what I'm talking about. But for people who don't, it's this community that was developed by women physicians that really cultivates this, hey, show up as you are. You do not want people to feel like they have to mask in order to belong here. And I felt like it really cultivated this sense of vulnerability that people just allow themselves to be raw, organic, and the depth of connection that developed from that space is much greater than if you go to a conference in academia and people are putting, their best face forward, quote unquote best, meaning that they don't want you to see through whatever it is in their statistical data. And I know from academia, people get desperate in order to appear perfect and they start compromising their data in order for even their data to look perfect. And it's so fascinating if we just think about, oh, well, that's the pressure. It's not a flaw of that person, but it's an indication of the pressure that they were experiencing, and maybe a lapse in integrity coming from probably how much pressure that they were experiencing in order to feel like they deserve to be where they are.
Yeah. The way that you put that is like, it doesn't necessarily excuse a lapse in integrity, but it just shows how powerful these forces really are. And it's so interesting about this. We hear a lot about authenticity, especially like on social media and that type of thing. And I still feel this. I notice this for myself as like this real pressure and desire to appear very buttoned up and very put together. And I know exactly what I'm doing. I have all my stuff together. At the same time, I feel like the people that I tend to relate to more are the people that, not that they don't have their stuff together, but they show their imperfections and they're vulnerable and they're willing to admit like, hey, I made a mistake. And so that's something that I've actively worked on. Like I've sent out emails and then I read them and I'm like, oh, there's a big typo in there. And then I'll send out, you know what? Hey guys, not perfect. Let's try this again. And so it's interesting that this perfectionism also can feel very isolating. Because we feel like, well, no one else is feeling like this. No one else is struggling with this because of the appearance that everybody's putting on. And I think that's the power of community too. Like you said, this ACE community created by Dr. Dina George and Dr. Dawn Sears. Dr. Sears has been on the show and I've tried to get Dina, but I know she's got lots of other things going on in her life. That's another power of community, is when we can all kind of just let our guard down and be who we are, be ourselves with each other. I don't want to forget your question though about how does it show up for me? We were talking about this a little bit too. It's resistance for me. So my big project right now is I'm creating a course, an online course. It's not something I've ever done before. And I went to work on it today and oh my gosh, that laundry really needed to be folded at that exact time. And those dishes needed to be done right then and there. So I noticed this for myself a lot too. When I did my master's program, that I would sit down to study and like, oh man, I'm going to clean out the refrigerator drawer because it needs to be scrubbed perfectly.
Yep. Absolutely.
And my refrigerator was clean. I did make it through my master's program successfully. But yeah, that's how it shows up for me. Procrastination, resistance. And I was sharing this with my coach last week and I said, I think this resistance, maybe that's a sign I shouldn't do this course. And it's now that's not the right time. And he said something to the effect of that when he hears people say that they see something as a sign, that he sees that as perfectionism stepping in. And I was like, oh, I never thought about it like that. So I just thought that was interesting. And my coach, we've worked together now for a couple of years. He knows me well. He knows kind of my tricks, my MO when I'm avoiding something.
I always love the compassionate, curious investigation of what the quote unquote sign is and to honor what it could be and explore what other potentials are true when it comes to what is it showing you. And when it comes to the course and your example of cleaning everything, that's so relatable. It's so relatable. And there's a part to it too, where it's like, well, we can actually think clearer when our environments are much more tidy. And sometimes if we clean up our external environment, it can really help clean up our internal environment and our thought process. I'm curious, after you were done cleaning, then what happened?
So this particular time I noticed, and so maybe we can spend some time on that too. Like, how do we know what's the excuse versus the no? Maybe this is something that could help me get in a better headspace. So I didn't listen to that voice because I know that voice about me. So I took that opportunity, got the work done, and then I needed a mental break because it's pretty mentally exhausting. So then I went to go wash the dishes. And then I was like, okay, I was feeling some momentum. I was feeling pretty good. I'm going to go back to it for a little bit. Then I'll take the dog out kind of thing, like these, like, the mini breaks type. just to get the momentum going. And so that was helpful. And everybody's a little bit different. I think that's something that you have to know yourself and know maybe we want to clean up your area or you want to get into that headspace or there's something that you need to do to bring on that muse or bring on that creativity that would help you in the moment. And it's just by being up against those situations often enough where you start to learn and notice in your body, at least for me, I can tell in my body, like, am I resisting this out of fear? Or is this like, no, I'm excited to get this going. So I'm going to clean up my space in order to put myself in a better frame of mind. Or is it like, "Ugh, I don't want to work on this course, so I'm going to clean up my office." It feels different in my body.
And what you highlighted there too is something that I think we've strongly reduced our ability to do, which is the mind-body connection. I think so many of us, especially in medicine, have had to dissociate from our body in order to do what we do.
Yeah.
And so then we're like, I don't know how to, it takes intention, you used that word before, to reassociate and reconnect with our bodily cues.
Yeah.
To be able to sit with those and then name it and say, what is this? What message is it sending me? Because I have a lot of times people that I work with in both therapy and coaching, if you have a diagnosis of ADHD or something like that, it's very quick to say, oh, that's the procrastination. It's for this reason. And if we explore it, a lot of the times it's associated with that fear of not doing it perfectly. And so what I heard you say is really tuning into you, observing your own patterns, and where you work with a coach, that person knows you well. In marriage and family therapy, we're looking for patterns. We're not saying things wrong with the individual. We're saying, hey, what are the patterns here? What's showing up behaviorally, but then also interpersonally, relationally, systemically, and seeing what role does it have? Or we're using the example of perfectionism. Well, what role does it have? Well, humans, we are meant to live in community. So in order to have this sense of belonging, which Brene Brown talks a lot about, is if we start stripping who we truly are and try to belong, then we're really fitting in, and that feels more empty and alone. But it makes sense that we want to appear a certain way in order to be accepted into a community. And you were saying about perfectionism being lonely, and I'm wondering if it's the shame that comes with not being able to meet the expectation that's itself lonely, because Brene Brown talks a lot about how if we have this standard that we are trying to meet, which is perfectionism, and we see where we are in comparison, it's always going to be lower than that. And in the gap that is in that place where perfectionism lives and where we perceive we are, that gap is shame. And as long as we attach to perfectionism, that shame will always be there, and shame thrives in isolation. So it will feel like you'll contract. And if people are feeling shame, if you're aware of what happens to your body when you're feeling shame, we want to be really, really small. And when we're in a shame spiral, our prefrontal cortex goes offline. So it's really hard to talk your way out of it. And if we're not really in a place where we've practiced mind-body connection, we may be like, oh my gosh, like, how do I deal with this? And what I find is very helpful for that is I love Peter Levine's work on somatic experiencing. Be able to really leverage your body's cues and to leverage your communication with your body and to support it out of a shame spiral means thinking about something where you feel authentic pride and getting into the authentic pride posture, putting your shoulders back and experiencing a sense that is kind of the opposite of I need to be as small as possible, but hey, I deserve to take up space just as I am. And then that can help your prefrontal cortex come back online and start thinking again. And I say that because when I go into a shame spiral, I'd go into therapy and I'd be talking about something and I'd go into a shame spiral and I can't think straight. And then I would judge myself for not being able to think straight. And then the therapy session would be over. And about 30 minutes later, all these thoughts come up. And it was very predictable where I could send an email to the therapist because I like to write and process whatever. Therapists put up with me that way. But I'm like, this is just a pattern I'm observing. And it wasn't until I heard people explain to me what happens when you're experiencing shame that I finally forgave myself for not being able to think clearly because it just made sense. So I offer that information to whoever's listening here because I'm like, I wish I would have understood that sooner. So I would have been more compassionate with myself.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I think you mentioned self-compassion and I wanted to go back to that. So great segue. That compassionate voice is so important for so many reasons. And Kristen Neff is the godmother of self-compassion. So I don't want to try to recreate anything that she says specifically. I love her work, but she talks about it really as bringing the mindfulness, the common humanity, and the kindness, that intention, kind of what's going on in our body, just even acknowledging, hey, this is really hard, being kind to ourselves. So whether that's a hand over the heart or something soothing, and then the common humanity again can be a guard against the isolation when we realize that everybody struggles with this at some point in their life. A lot of people struggle with perfection, especially people that are high achievers. And so if we can just recognize that, hey, it's okay. We've been immersed in this society and this environment that is setting up these perfectionistic tendencies for us. And so again, like you said, it's not our fault and we're not to blame for it. Only then can we really feel empowered to do something about it, to do something differently, whether that's, hey, reach out to a friend for support, or maybe take a walk or snuggle with your dog or whatever that looks like. And that self-compassion has been so powerful, life-changing for me over the course of my own journey. And I know it has been for you too. Something else that you mentioned about the benefits of perfectionism and the fear that we'll lose our productivity, our products won't be as good, our materials or whatever we're doing, our work will not be as good if we don't have that perfectionistic ideal. And one thing I love about Kristen Neff, there's a lot of things I love about her. Her work really disproves that and proves that people who practice self-compassion and see themselves in this compassionate way with curiosity rather than judgment actually are more productive and their mental health is better. And so that kind of dissuades that fear that I'll lose my edge or I won't be as useful a member of society or whatever that looks like if I don't have high standards for myself. The other thing that I love about just recognizing, hey, how are these tendencies impacting you? And that's something that I do when I coach with a lot of clinician leaders tend to have very high standards for themselves. So we'll explore it. How are these standards impacting you? What's the result of kind of this way of thinking? If it's working for you now, great. But if it's not, that's probably why it's coming up in coaching. So let's talk about it. And the impact that it has on other people, because then we tend to have high standards for other people as well. And then that perpetuates this perfectionistic cycle that people around us will feel like they have to live up to our high standards. Then they might beat themselves up, be judgmental, and then it has a ripple effect on the people around them. So it really has much more of an impact in our own environment than we tend to realize.
Absolutely. And a lot of people struggle under the perfectionistic leadership. It can come across very micromanaging, very anxiety ridden. And also if you have a perfectionist working for a perfectionist, it's constantly in this state of judgment, shame, and reduced psychological safety that you can't do anything enough. And there's this hypervigilance that comes with it that's exhausting and often will result in worse outcomes, or people will be afraid to report mistakes because they're afraid of the repercussions or the way that will be received. We can tell how people judge themselves by how they're judging others. So we can tell how we're judging ourselves based on what we judge other people on. In the Ram Dass documentary, The Becoming Nobody, Ram Dass talks about we look at the world as if we're like on different TV stations. So the first TV station can be like physical, where, you know, in our society, you and I identify as women. We have a lot of physical standards that are present in our society. I'm sure men do too. I can speak for myself, is that a lot of the pressures throughout my life has been a physical pressure to change or look a certain way physically. So if I'm on that channel and I'm thinking about my own physical flaws, then I'm going to be comparing to other people. I'm going to be noticing their physical traits. The next channel, it's a psychological channel. So we're thinking about mental health, things like that. So if I'm thinking about, oh, I'm super depressed, well, maybe I'm thinking about everyone else is less depressed than me or something of that nature, because the lens of the channel that I'm on is the psychological channel. So I'm going to be evaluating people based off of how I'm evaluating myself on that channel. And then the next channel is more of that shared humanity, like the common humanity that you brought up. And say, I struggle, you struggle, we all struggle. Well, I'm on that channel and I'm observing the common humanity in the people just being human. the deepest channel is the spiritual channel. So if you subscribe to believing that we're spiritual beings that are living this human experience, then we connect on a soul level. And you're more likely to observe your shared traits, the things you have in common with people, than you are to be judging them for their flaws or anything that's really materialistic or, in this temporary physical state that we have here. I am currently on this mission and really devoted to developing my spiritual self. And I think after a lot of my near-death experiences with my illness, is just like nothing else matters. And I felt that without the spiritual development, I've been left so empty. And it's like, okay, great. Well, we're here for a short period of time. And every single day I think about it because I have the memories of being in the hospital bed thinking like, actually, none of this matters. And the struggle with that is that I was there alone. And so I lived this life of like multiple existences in my brain where I have the memories, but I engage with people who weren't there.
Yeah.
So they know the parts of me that they have interacted with. This is very confusing in the brain because my brain's like, oh, remember, none of this matters. And when I tap into that spiritual channel, I just realize how much more free I feel. Because you look around, you see this human pain and suffering. We're all just trying to figure it out. We're having this very temporary experience and we're being washed away by all these anxieties, all these competitive natures that are really driving us apart. Like, that's not how I want to live.
Yeah.
And once I moved from Houston, the hustle and bustle, working in academia, to the woodlands of Texas, where I like more nature, working in a community clinic, it really naturally allowed me to tune more with the spiritual self because the things people are struggling with are really fights for survival. And I get to look into their eyes and say, I'm here with you. I am connected with you. We are shared energies. And I'm not a religious person by any means, which has sometimes been difficult because I am not grounded in this. Oh yeah, well, of course, that's what I believe. In my head, I actually really struggled with history. So I used to judge myself a lot in church because I couldn't remember anything in the Bible. I couldn't remember anything. And so I'm saying this to your listeners as someone who doesn't have a strong religious background because some of it's religious trauma and the way that my family used it against people. And I can still speak from that core connectedness, which I feel from my heart.
Yeah.
It's not coming from my head. It doesn't require a whole bunch of scripture. Therefore, it transcends any sort of religious belief system. And if people don't believe that they're spiritual beings and some don't, then I'm here to listen with curiosity of what they truly believe, because I am under no impression that what I believe is capital T truth.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you for sharing all of that. What I hear from you is that your spiritual experience is just that. It's an experience. It's not necessarily belief based on what you might have learned when you were younger, what you've been taught. It's what you've experienced. The gift that you're able to give to other people is that connectedness. You're able to offer them that lifeline of, here, I'm opening, we're connected energies, and I'm tossing the line to you so that you can hold it and that we can be connected together. And that's really, really powerful. And that's something that I think, at least in Western society, we just don't do that. We don't do it enough.
Yeah.
It's not something that we're taught. I think it's not something that's prioritized. I have very, very limited experience of other Eastern cultures, but from what I understand, it's a little bit more prioritized in some Eastern cultures that we're really connected to other people and this shared humanity, shared experience, rather than more of an individualistic, I'm here for myself and I'm going to step on people in order to get done what I need done. And it's all about me and the self-centeredness. I recognize some of the self-centeredness, at least for myself and my perfectionism, where sometimes I'll catch myself like, you kind of need to just get over yourself, Laura.
I love that. Yeah, that's so.
Sometimes I break my own tension with humor, but then I laugh at my own silly attempt to make a joke.
Got it. I love it. I think that goes so greatly into just thinking, like, if we think about at the end of life, like when I sat in my hospital bed and I thought I was going to die, I was like, I was actually resentful about all the way our achievement-based culture directs us to things that don't matter, because I looked upon all the things I gave up to get there, and it was actually what mattered. And I didn't even know at that point that my ex-boyfriend would die a couple months later, but he did. And what you said there about perfectionism and just thinking about the humor is like, we take life so seriously, but not serious enough at the same time. We take life so seriously that we're not living our lives.
Yeah.
Because we take ourselves so seriously. And if we think about like, if this is our last day here, how is perfectionism bringing us towards how we would want to spend it? And how is it driving us away from the things that matter most?
Yeah.
That was very biased and probably a little bit leading in the second way I said it. But for me, it certainly was driving me as this hyper anxious state where I didn't think I was good enough. You and I developed one of the strongest friendships I've ever had. And we've met like twice in person. And what I realized is I don't let people in because I'm so afraid that if they got to know me deeply enough, they would realize that I'm this flawed human being that they can't tolerate because I can't tolerate me. I can't tolerate my imperfections. I don't love myself. So therefore, that opened up the gateway to say, if I do not work on self-compassion, self-love, I will continue to reject people because I will continue to feel I'm not deserving of their love and acceptance. So if we feel that way towards ourselves, we will attract people who validate our feelings of not being loved and be averse, oftentimes, the people who give us love. And it takes that healing to be like, maybe I didn't deserve that poor treatment that I was giving that I thought I did. And in self-compassion for me was like putting these lenses on that it went further than just romantic. It was like in work situations, like, nah, I don't tolerate that behavior. So when I was in more recent jobs, I said something about being a people pleaser. And the feedback I got was like, I think you cured that of yourself. And what they were reflecting back to me is I developed strong boundaries. I developed a low BS tolerance because I'm like, nope, tolerated that long enough. And once you put those glasses on of self-compassion, you realize it doesn't have to be that way. You don't deserve it. You shift. And those people in your life who benefited off of your lack of boundaries, your desire to be perfect, your willingness to do anything to go above and beyond, once you make that shift, they'll be a little disgruntled. Mm-hmm. And if you've got that core of people pleasing, got to be perfect, it's like, oh no, did I do something wrong? And if we state here, no, expect that, that doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're making that shift.
Yes.
And what can that shift look like for you? It's scary at first because we have to trust what Laura said is that Kristen Neff found that self-compassion actually improves performance and perfectionism actually often detracts from it. So how do we trust that when we've been working and operating in one way for so long?
Yeah, it's true. And it is a big shift. And anytime anybody makes a shift in their life, I went through a divorce, and that was around the time I was really discovering all of these, self-compassion on this leadership and personal journey. And it does have an impact. I certainly didn't mean to say my divorce was caused by any of this. All that to say is I know how traumatic those major earthquakes in life can be. And there are things that can change in somebody's life based on making shifts and discovering this self-compassion and not putting up with BS anymore. Like some people might get hurt or feel they've been entitled all this time and now they haven't been. Anytime boundaries get set, then somebody is usually impacted. But the payoff is so much better. And at least for me, I don't always know that I've made the right decision for myself until I kind of have to move into the space and explore it a little bit before it's clear that, okay, yeah, this was aligned with my goals and with who I am and who I'm trying to become. And it's just that practice and noticing it and taking in data like a scientist, like, okay, I kind of move this way and it feels open, it feels easier and it feels more aligned with me. And I go this way and it feels closed off and small and it doesn't feel good. And so how can I move more that direction? And finding people that like the ACE community, people that are supportive and in your corner and cheering you on and not trying to keep you stuck, not trying to be that lobster that's pulling you back into the hot boiling water.
Yeah.
And also not being the lobster for somebody else.
Yeah. In the documentary, Becoming Nobody, the whole premise of it is from stopping the somebody, quote unquote, somebody that oftentimes we chase is this external persona of like, if we're on social media, where you get all the engagement and the clicks and the, approval of other people, whereas becoming nobody is really about becoming who you are.
Yeah.
So that's what I really valued as the takeaway that you just shared as well.
Yeah, I'd love to check that out. I love Ram Dass. And I love what you just said there. That's something that I noticed myself telling a client recently. We were talking about this personal professional journey. And is it really like an improvement? And I said, I really see it as becoming more of who we truly are.
Yeah.
Because It's not like we're trying to be better than we were, because there's nothing wrong with us the way we are now. We've got all these layers on us, again, that society has put on us. And how can we strip away and be more of our true essence?
And I like how you pictured it too, about doing it kind of in one little turtle step at a time. And I checking in, say, am I more in flow? How do I feel? Am I, or here, am I meeting do I feel more constricted? And how do I feel? And again, it takes really developing that mind-body connection again and realizing that flow state is desirable. So oftentimes, if we've been in this hustle, it feels very difficult. And I've shared with you before we started recording about how a hard time dialing down my internship requirements because the state of hustle and overwhelm became so familiar. And even though it's not desirable, it takes intention and it takes developing that neural network and that repatterning of the brain that self-compassion becomes a new normal and being in that flow state, like this is desirable. When people say what they want to feel more of, it's often peace and contentment. Once we get there, we're like, oh, this is so unfamiliar that we go create overwhelm and like, no, maybe I'll do 100 more million things at one time in order to get back to that state of familiarity, which is overwhelm and never enoughness. Like, I've been there. I can totally relate, still relate. And again, going back to our first episode, reclaim the narratives and then practice the behaviors enough that they become our new norm.
Yes. Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to have you. So wonderful to talk to you as always. I appreciate you and everything that you're doing.
Likewise. I'm so grateful to be here and I just love everything that you're doing as well. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you. Where can our listeners find you if they want to learn more about you?
Maybe they should come on YouTube and tell me to record a few things. My YouTube channel is still up, A Life True to You. It will come back alive probably this winter. They can find me on LinkedIn as well. Of course, if you're on Facebook, you can do that. I'm usually on it as well.
Thank you so much. So wonderful to talk to you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much.
Before you go, let me share a quick story about when I was new as a physician leader. I remember very clearly walking into a boardroom with a meeting with fellow executives, and I felt like a massive imposter. I told myself, I'm not smart enough to be here. I don't know enough about this topic. I'm not able to contribute in the way that I wish I could. I was a physician. I had an MBA. I had other leadership skills. And here I was just doubting myself incredibly. And it held me back. It really kept me from contributing to my team and to the overall organization. It took me years to develop the confidence that I needed in order to be successful in that role. And I eventually learned that my imposter syndrome wasn't about my lack of competence or my lack of skill or knowledge. I hadn't had the training that I needed in order to be successful. I've seen this over and over in my years of coaching clinician leaders that we're asked to be in leadership positions, but we haven't been given the tools and the trainings. Maybe we've gotten some leadership training, but it's rather generic and it's not meant for us. That's why I created the Clinician Leadership Compass course. This course is designed specifically for physicians, nurse practitioners, and physician associates who are in leadership positions and who are struggling with overwhelm, burnout, imposter syndrome, isolation. I created this course just for you. This course includes real coaching sessions with real clinician leaders, and you'll be able to take away practical tools that you can use immediately to reduce your overwhelm and burnout. And CME is included as well. The course is now open, and when you complete it, you'll earn up to 10 AMA PRA Category 1 CME credits and the Certified Clinician Leader designation. I would love for you to be there. Go to www.thepurposefulmd.com/courses to enroll today, and I can't wait to see you inside. Thanks for listening to Designing Healthcare That Cares. If today's conversation gave you a new idea or inspired you to see things differently, share this episode with a colleague and keep the conversation going. And if you're ready to take the next step in building a thriving healthcare culture, you can find resources and ways to connect with me at drlaurasuttin.com. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not medical advice, and it should not replace care from a qualified healthcare provider. Always seek the guidance of your physician or other qualified professional for any medical questions or decisions.